apart from working and saving images, Photoshop is also capable to work with video files and creating frame animations. In this video, I'm going to show you two different types of workflows: how to create a GIF animated banner and how to improve and render a video file. So first, let's start with the GIF project, which is going to be a banner based on our earlier design. And as you can see, I already have a square format created, and I also have a logo layer group, which I'm going to use as my second frame for the animation. It will be a very simple banner consisting only of these two frames. And to be able to set up the animation, we will need a panel called Timeline. So it's under Window, Timeline. And there, first of all, the question is whether we need a video timeline or a frame animation. Of course, for this project, I will need the frame animation. So once I selected that, I can click on this button, and you will see already that we have one frame created for us. But the first frame I actually want to be without the logo. So I'm going to turn that off. You see now that frame is going to show the image. I want this frame to play for 1 second. That's what I can set up here from this drop down under the thumbnail. And then I would like to have another frame. So I'm going to click on create a new frame or duplicate current frame. And for the second frame, I'm going to turn on the logo. Now in this layer group, I have the logo and also have a backdrop with a reduced opacity. If this is all I wanted to do, I can now decide whether I want this animation to continue. So instead of playing it only once, I can choose forever, which means it will be looped and the GIF is going to play these two frames without stopping, which is most of the times what we need. So I'm going to select forever. And now we can go to File, Export, Save for Web, where we have several options we can use to specify exactly how this animation will work. So first of all, I don't need this to be this big. So instead of 800, I'm just going to reduce it down to 300 pixels, which will already reduce the file size. But then I would be able to also change other settings here. For now, I'm happy with the way it looks, and I can actually test it here already. If I click on play animation, I can see the two frames changing. Now at this point, if I feel like there's not enough time for each frame to play, I would have to go back to the timeline and make the changes. So I'm going to click on done, and then I can select both frames by holding down Shift key and then change them to, let's say, 2 seconds each. I can also preview how long this will play here within the timeline panel. I can stop it as well. And now once again, we can check how big this is going to be. So with the settings we used, it's going to be 95 kilobytes. If I'm not too restricted with file size and I can increase it a bit, then we can even create transitions between these frames. I'm going to just click on done again. And coming back to the timeline, what I can do is to select the first frame and the second frame, and then click on this option here at the bottom to create tween for this animation. Once I click on that, it will bring up a dialog box where I can choose what I would like to create a tween with. Currently it's set to selection, and I can also decide how many frames I want to add. I can also decide which parameters I would like to animate. But for now, I think that's all good. So I'm just going to click on OK. And if I play now, you will see it will play each of these between frames also for 2 seconds, which is obviously too long. So only the keyframes has to play that long, but these between frames can be reduced down to probably 0.1 seconds. So I selected all of them, set it up like that, and if I now play it, we will see a nice transition there between 2 frames, but only between those 2 frames and not between the last and the first frames. So we also have to create the between animation for that. And it's really easy because we just have to do exactly the same thing. Select the first frame and the last frame, click on between, choose 5, click OK, and you will see after the 7th frame, again, we have 5 frames transitioning into the original image. Once again, I just have to change the timing of these to 0.1, or I can make them even faster, maybe 0.05. And I'm going to actually use the same on these frames here. So change the time, other 0.05. All right, now let's have a look at how it plays. So a nice transition there and another transition there. If you create transitions like these in GIF animations, they will increase the file size considerably. And just to prove that for you, I'm going back to File, Export, Save for Web, and take a look at the file size here. So it was below 100K. Now it's more than 0.5 MB. But I can test it once again, and it will play much more smoother than before. It plays a little bit slow here, but what I normally do is to click on Preview to preview it in the browser, where the transition will be much smoother, and I can also see all the features or attributes below. So if I feel like it needs to be reduced in file size, I can go back and make some changes on this. So one of the things that we can do is to reduce the colors available for the GIF. Instead of 256, we can have, let's say, 128, which already reduced the file size. But then we can also increase the lossy option, which will degrade the quality, but it will radically reduce the file size. But let's just say we are not restricted that much, so I can go up to 256, and then we can save this out without the lossy option. So I just reduce it down to 0. So that looks perfect image quality, and we can save this file. There's the GIF format, and then I can click on Save. So the good thing about creating the GIF animation here within Photoshop is that you still have all your layers, so you can use Photoshop as you would for normal images, but by combining it with the timeline panel, you can turn your layers into animated frames. And the same way, you can even put Photoshop to use when it comes to editing videos. So let me show you that as well. By going to the File menu, I'm just going to choose Open and go to the file that I need, which is a video file. It's called Blue Mountains, an MOV file format. I will click on Open, and it opens up as a separate document with one video layer on it. Notice that we also have the timeline, and now it looks different because this is a video timeline, not a frame animation. Photoshop automatically sets it up, so we don't have to do anything with that. And by pressing space, we can already play it. Now the playback is going to be much worse quality than actually the video is. So if I stop it and we wait a bit, then it will render. This is a full HD video, so it will always play back in a reduced quality until we render the video out. But here in the settings, you can change the resolution of the playback. So if you want to play back with the original quality, you can set it to 100%. And then by pressing space, if your computer can handle it, Photoshop will be able to play the video back with the full quality. So on the timeline, we can scrub back and forth and see how this video looks at the moment. And the main reason to open up a video file in Photoshop is because you can do exactly the same things with videos what you would do normally with images. A quick one would be the vibrance adjustment layer, with which we can increase the intensity of the colors in the video. You can see I drag these values up. Already looks so much better. But then let's add also a bit of contrast. So I'm going to use levels, and I'm going to drag the highlights down and the shadows up, something like that. So now if we play the video, we will see again frame rate will drop even more because now we have additional effects that the computer has to process. But once I press space again, I can see before and after. And if I want, I can even animate adjustment layers. So for example, we can add curves, but instead of keeping it in the video group, I can drag it outside of that. And you will see then it becomes separate here in the timeline as well, which means we can animate its opacity and also these other options, which is great because this second half of the video is a bit too dark, so I want to increase the brightness on it, while the beginning of the video was already bright enough. So we can set an opacity for this roughly around here. By clicking on the stopwatch, I will tell Photoshop I want it to become visible here, while before it, I can add another keyframe where I'm going to reduce the opacity of this layer. And just to make sure it's not too drastic, the change between these two keyframes, I can drag these frames around as well. And now if I play it back, I can see in the beginning, it's not going to show me the brightness difference. And around here, the curves adjustment layer is going to get activated and it brightens up the image, compensating for the brightness change in the video itself. But then of course we could add text and combine images into this video and even put several clips together and edit them, just like you would in Adobe Premiere or After Effects. Of course, Photoshop is not the primary tool in Adobe Creative Cloud for video editing, but it still gives you plenty of features to do basic improvements and edits with your video files. Now, what you need to remember is once you are ready with your project, you go to File, Export, and choose Render Video. Here, you can choose which codec you want to use. I recommend the H.264, which is the default. You can also set up the size you wish to use and which part of the video timeline you want to render, so you don't have to render the whole. And once you are happy with your settings, all you have to do is just click on Render, which is going to export the video for you. Now this can take some time depending on the length on the video and also the amount of effects that you used, because each frame has to be created one by one. And if you remember, this short video, which is around like 20 seconds, had around 730 frames, because each second is 30 frames. And once it's rendered, we can have a look at the file, which should play nicely, having all the effects on it as we set it up. So its vibrance is increased, the contrast is increased, and we can see the brightness is increasing around this point to keep it the same as it was starting with. But of course, all this is more like a teaser what's available when you start working with video files in Photoshop. And the same way, in the next video, I'm going to give you another teaser how to work with 3D layers.